Are you a baby boomer who is struggling with the impact of poor parenting by toxic parents? Are you a baby boomer who is either a toxic parent or a toxic grandparent? Or are you an adult child of a baby boomer or of a Gen X parent who really is struggling with the impact and the weight of poor parenting because you're still in this very dysfunctional relationship with them? Or finally, if you're somebody who's looking to become a parent sometime in the future and really want to avoid poor parenting practices, then today lean in, because in today's show, I will be sharing highlights from this phenomenal book by, sadly, the now deceased Dr. Susan Forward, and it's called Toxic Parents: Overcoming Their Hurtful Legacy and Reclaiming Your Life. Very powerful book. Before I dive into any of that, if you're one of my regulars, welcome back. Great to see you here. If you're new here, welcome. My name is Bybreen Samuels, and I help baby boomers reinvent themselves psychologically, practically, and technically so they can thrive in their third act of life. So here we are, taking a look at this book, Toxic Parent. Now, at the end of last week's session, I mentioned that I would be reviewing a very powerful book, and it literally does what it says on the tin. It really is a confrontational, in a very healthy way, to enable each and every one of us to get free if we have ever experienced or continue to experience toxic parenting. Now, I wish I came across this book, but in the child version when I was 9 years old, because I was part of a family. My family environment could be described very much as a toxic environment, and I ran away when I was 9 years old because of physical abuse. So the whole family was experiencing domestic violence from my dad. But I'm so glad that this book came into my life in the mid 90s, I think it was, when I was in my 30s, and actually made a declaration that I can't live like this anymore. I can't live within this toxic environment. So Dr. Susan Forward has written this very profound, I'm describing it as a masterpiece, because it really does do two things. It highlights what does toxic parenting actually look like, and breaks down into different categories, as well as providing a guide and a framework with regards to healing and recovering from experiences of toxic parenting. Very powerfully and very compassionately does she lead us through this journey. So, as I said, there's two things, two main themes: what's toxic parenting, and also how to move forward with your life so that you can live it in a very expansive and healed way. Now, the framework that she uses is very practical. It's a practical framework whereby she gives case studies, she gives very clear guides in terms of how you are able to move through this relationship so you can then take control of who you are. So Dr. Forward, as I said, has now passed on, but part of her actual thesis was the combination of another therapy called Primal Therapy, which was actually introduced by Arthur Vanov. And primal therapy essentially is this recognition that suppressed feelings actually cause neurosis. And the idea is for these repressed feelings or suppressions that are really holding each and every one of us back because of poor parenting actually is gently brought to the surface in a very kind, gentle, therapeutic setting that allows the healing to take place. And so Dr. Susan Forward combined her own framework because she was a doctor of psychology. So she had a deep analytical understanding and process of what it means to live within dysfunctional families. And she sort of blended or introduced this idea of primal therapy so that we can all go on to heal. So, as I said, back in feels like the mid to late 90s, I came across this book. And when I bought my first copy of this book, it was one of those books that you go through and you nod. Now, not everything is going to apply to each and every one of you, but if you're somebody that has lived in or been through a dysfunctional family, what Susan's book does is actually bring acknowledgement. You can see yourself in this book in a very powerful way. So what does she do? She highlights what is toxic parenting. So for those of you who one day wish to be parents, here are some of the features and traits of toxic parenting. So there's the emotional side, the emotional abuse that can take place. So there's emotional abuse, there's physical abuse, there's psychological abuse, there's sexual abuse. And that can show itself in terms of isolation, gaslighting, guilt tripping, negligence, neglect. All of these different ways that as we've tried to engage with our parents, and the beauty of this book is that it's not only focused on parents, because the framework allows you to work through so that you begin to identify what does a healthy relationship look like. So if the relationship primarily is within your family environment, be it your parents, as I said, when I was 9, I ran away because of the physical violence in my home. But actually, the relationship with my siblings was exceptionally toxic. And when I was in my mid-30s, I declared that, it's time for me to really take charge and lead my life in a very healthy way. And that's why this book is so, so empowering. And once I started to become very public about what dysfunctionality from a family setting looked like for me, it was not so much a wow and fascination, but people started to open up about their own challenges within their family environments, and they just couldn't break free. So my first copy of this book, I literally, over, I would say, certainly the late 90s into the noughties, handed this book around. So my actual first copy of this book is very dog-eared, but it's powerful. And so Susan wants each and every one of us to step into the power of healing and transformation. So she also wants this sense of self-awareness. And she introduces the concept of self-awareness because she wants each person not to blame themselves for what they didn't receive within their family environments. So self-awareness and self-consciousness about what took place within family environments is the first thing that she wants each and every person to address. Secondly, what she also invites is, well, how does one begin to navigate? Now, this book is packed with case studies. There's examples, there's vignettes taken from her own casework when she was a therapist around how to begin to take care of yourself, looking at things psychologically. What's the psychological impact of having toxic parents? Well, one of them is low self-esteem. And this sense of not feeling that you could trust anybody, because there has been this fracture in the relationship with your toxic parent or parents. And the impact has been psychological. You can't trust anybody. How many people have we met in our lives? I recall a conversation with a group of new friends actually last year, and the conversation was around people's different experiences. And there are so many people that can still recall word for word every negative thing that their parent has ever said to them. So Susan highlights one aspect of toxic parenting is the psychological. It's a sense of low self-esteem, anxiety. How many people do we come across that have this sense? They show their sense of anxiety and vulnerability. Then there's the emotional side. When we have been traumatized or troubled because of toxic parenting, it has an emotional impact on us. And one of the things that Susan argues for in this book, and why on reading it, it might appear to be confrontational, but she advocates for confrontation in a very healthy way, because she said what isn't confronted gets passed on. And we've all been in and around people. Maybe at times in our lives we were equally that toxic person, but we've been in and around people who haven't been able to digest the impact of what happened to them, and then it gets played out into their everyday lives. So she talks about owning the emotional terrain of toxic parenting. So how could you overcome it? Well, there's therapy. Going to therapy or going to counseling or having some type of therapeutic intervention is going to help you grow through this process. Another thing that comes through when you begin to take on the work of dysfunctional families is that you learn, or she gives phenomenal techniques and ideas in terms of how to begin to set boundaries, the type of boundaries that are needed that's going to give you healthy protection on the one hand, but also enable you to grow and thrive on the other hand. She also talks about the capacity to break the cycle of toxic parenting, whereby having worked through step by step, not in a rushed way, not in a forced way, but in a way where you have arrived at the point where you decide you can no longer maintain the charade or the false narrative of this relationship with your parents, whether you choose to remain in relationship with your parents once you have gone through this process or not. What you're doing is breaking the cycle, and the cycle is around no longer maintaining the false narrative of the relationship with your parents. She also very expertly guides you through, well, what happens when you take on your parents, what some of their reactions will be. You know, there may be denial, there may be shutdowns, there may be ignoring, there may be this sense of smudging out, but she leads us so beautifully through some of the areas. And now there's a chapter in the book, and it is called, I think it's chapter 13. It's called Confrontation, the Road to Independence. And so once you've worked through all of these different elements that help you towards emotional relief and release, then chapter 13, where are we? It's pages 223. She gives these wonderful examples of case studies where, and she's got brilliant titles. It's like preparing for the opening night. It's, you know, you've rehearsed. It's like doing a Broadway show or doing a show here in London where you've done all of your rehearsals, you're ready, it's opening night. And the opening night is that you have built a foundation of confidence because you want to change the dynamics of the relationship that help you to thrive. And then she breaks it down in terms of what to expect, and she gives insights around that. She also lays out what a quiet confrontation looks like. So confrontation, and she does advocate that it's either in person or in writing. And if push comes to shove, using the telephone is the third and very last option. And the reason why she doesn't advocate as that as a primary one is because if you are engaging with your parents and they're very defensive, if it's on the phone, they can put the phone down. Hence why she advocates for this sense of safety, because you're psychologically prepared to move and work through the problems, but also what happens if your parents resist. So she takes you through that and quiet confrontation, and she gives you phrasing as to how you can move through when your parents are being obstructive. And then she gives you an indications. What can you expect after confrontation? What is your reaction? And being with your reaction, it might be unsettling at first, but then, you know, you begin to realize the anxiety that you were feeling and holding leading up to this now has or begins to dissipate because you really have crossed that first hurdle. Then it's about your parents' reaction, the impact on your parents and the siblings. It's just beautifully laid out. And as I said, the book isn't just for parental relationships, it's for any type of relationship. It's with relationship with your siblings, or relationships with friends, but what it's leading you towards is this very healthy expression of what it means to take your life on, to heal, to release, to do it in a way. It could be around community that's going to help you release. And one of the things that can help you here is this idea of self-parenting or reparenting, which I love, because as adults, we do have the capacity. We've lived, 5, 6, 7 decades, that whatever has happened with our parents in one form or another, we still have skills now that we can begin to reparent ourselves. Now, with an astrological lens, when we're looking at parenting, primarily mothering, but I'm going to bring mother and father in here. So through the astrological lens, if you understood, for example, where your moon lies in your chart, that could be a catalyst for you to exploring what are the ways that I could begin to parent myself that's going to liberate myself and give me this emotional wisdom and sensibility and really understanding yourself. So, for example, there are 4 elements in astrology. So if you have your moon in a fire sign, let's say that it's in Sagittarius, the way that you like to be stimulated, that you could begin to reparent yourself. With the moon in Sagittarius, there's a sense of wow and wonderment and being in the world and exploring the world. And maybe it's about exploring the world's philosophies, or maybe your healing comes through understanding what wisdom could be extracted from these philosophies, for example, or it could be by being around different people, different cultures, different countries, because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Jupiter is the king of the world, really, in a sense. But it really is about how do you extract wisdom in a way that's going to embellish your life, but also others. So if you've got your moon in a fire sign, but particularly I'm just pointing out regarding Sagittarius, there is this sense of wow, there's a sense of freedom and expansiveness. If you have your moon, for example, in an earth sign, let's pick Taurus, because the moon is exalted in Taurus, meaning it wants the best of the experiences. A way that you can begin to explore reparenting yourself could be about the solid things that you build that bring emotional safety into your world, that makes you really satisfied, where you're sitting back and it's because you've got these tangible things in your world where you may not have had them, for example, in your younger years, but it's through what you build and what you truly value. So explore what is it that you truly value, and by doing that and knowing that, you can begin to reparent yourself from that perspective. If you have the moon in water, where the moon does rule Cancer, which is water, then it's really this exploration of nourishment and sensitivity and care. If we think of the crab, Cancer, the crab, it has a hard shell, it's a carapace, and underneath that carapace is are your sensitive feelings and your emotions, and this sense of harmony and peace and protection and nourishment. Cancer, it's water, so maybe walking by an ocean, maybe swimming, maybe a physical movement that involves water, whereby you have the time to explore emotions. That could be a way in for you with regards to how you begin to reparent yourself. And so there's a gentleness, there's a protectiveness around how you begin to heal yourself, reparent yourself. And then, so we've done for air. So if you have your moon in an air sign, let's pick Gemini, then one way in which you could begin to reparent yourself is through exploring and sharing the ideas of what was it like growing up in a dysfunctional family, and you're sharing it with other people, because Gemini is the one that goes back and forth. What was your experience like? What was your experience like? This was my experience. And so being in and around a supportive group is a way whereby you can begin to explore healing that adds to your life, where you begin to reparent. So we've done air, we've done fire, we've done water, and we've done earth. So looking at your moon sign from through the astrological lens can give you some insights. But also, whether it's astrological or not, what this book introduces you to is like interruption. And the interruption is around you can no longer, you're choosing no longer to live this false narrative around it's not okay, actually, the way that your parents have related to you, whether they continue to relate to you in a negative way or a toxic way or through childhood. It's what you have experienced. It's you're drawing a line in the sand. You are setting your boundaries that you choose not to live like this. I know for me, my declaration was I just can't and I won't live like this anymore. I know my life deserves better. And as I said, the more that you're able to shine your light on yourself to begin healing is the more that, indirectly you give people permission to explore it themselves. I mean, that was my particular experience. And for those of you who don't have children, but one day wish to have children, then you really can't go wrong by exploring all of the concepts in this phenomenal masterpiece. Now, Dr. Susan Forward threw down the gauntlet, and she really was a pioneer in traversing toxic families, toxic relationships. Now, there's more of a contemporary psychologist, and her name is Dr. Shafali Sabari. I first came across her, I think it was through Oprah, I don't know, it feels like 10 years ago. And so she's a leading advocate regarding conscious parenting. So if you are somebody, a younger person, you could be, Gen Z, you could be millennial, you could be a late Gen Xer who's looking to have children, then certainly read this book. You can't go wrong. It is exceptional. And then check out the work of Dr. Shafali Sabari, because she focuses on conscious parenting. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Some insights in terms of what this powerful book can do for your life, how you can step into your own power. So therefore you throw off the shackles of being held back. It's the psychological holding back. It's what you're unable to let go of. But this is a process, whether you go to therapy or not. This book is a replication of therapy in a very dynamic, very transparent, very transformational way that can take you from where you are to where you want to be, so that you can have these open, loving, engaging, shared relationships in very healthy ways, whereby you begin to thrive. So I would love to hear what your experience is like. Put your comments in the comment box below. And please, if there's anybody in your life, if you have a baby boomer parent, maybe a present, or gift yourself this present so that you begin to heal. Or if there's somebody in your life who is struggling because of the impact of dysfunctional families, please, please, please pass this book along. Be the lighthouse for your friends and your colleagues, acquaintances who are struggling, and help them set themselves free. So that's what I wanted to share with you. Please like, share, subscribe, turn on the notification bell for when I go live every week, and put your comments in the comment box below. I would love to hear your experiences. I think the more that we can have these open-hearted, gentle, loving conversations that move us one stage further to our freedom in a very authentic way, whereby you're leading your life with light and love and joy, I think the more of it. I will see you again next week. Have a fantastic week. Stay well, and I'll see you then. Bye-bye.